Uh, when I put this new collection together, I realized how many of the poems had to do with music. And so this one is called Inexplicable World. A first set of headphones purchased on impulse in an airport, then tried at home while paying bills, but alone with the music, I sing along or drum with my hands, making enough music that my wife can hear it in her study. I've tried guarding myself, keeping the music within, but this morning I'm humming again as Pablo Casals plays Manuel de Falla's Nana, a complication, since Casals also hums or groans or growls as he plays a low whale song that sometimes precedes the bow, then merges with it. When I come forth from my sound thicket, I find Annie singing in the kitchen, cleaning up the mess I made cooking our breakfast. How often she whistles as she writes, or hums without knowing it as she shops, an endearing habit her mother once had. Listening to her after Casals, it seems the whole inexplicable world might have come about through someone humming to herself. She slips from one song to the next, none of it anything I know. And listening from the door, I could be at the dawn of creation, hearing the music that is behind or before or inside everything. Unguarded self-song, moving above the dishes, bringing order to the cups and bowls. Thank you. We lived for 10 years in Western Massachusetts and then moved to Ireland in 2000. When we were in Northampton or in Florence, I was working in Natchog Hospital in Willimantic and also up at Cooley Dickinson Hospital in Northampton. And I'll read one of the nursing poems that are 15 years now behind me, but just to touch base here with Western Massachusetts. Night shift, Cooley Dickinson Hospital. Smoking was still allowed in the hospital, though only on the psychiatric unit, only in that one room where the invisible ceiling fan repeated its meaningless tut, tut, tut. Some type of weather tapped briefly on the black windows and stopped. Then there was just the worn leather of Billie Holiday in the back of the mind, and the elderly minister leaning forward and telling me he no longer believed in God. But it was his job to show up on Sundays. It was still important to affirm what he could. But he wasn't telling me this. He was asking. And my job was to fire up the cigarette he wasn't allowed to light. My job was to nod and ask him to say more and wait as he drew smoke into the narrow hallways of the bronchioles, exhaled and said, "Faith is a gift of the Holy Ghost. It is given, and it can be taken away." See us in that room in the past, both of us used to being of help, and him leaning towards me to receive a second light, and how he manages to show his gratitude by offering his defeated smile and is trying, even after the words were taken from him and all he could do was shake, to minister to me by looking me straight in the eye. From time to time, I'm invited to be on a panel of writers discussing some topic, and I find it easier to be on my own because I get into arguments with myself just fine without anybody else involved. This is a poem in which the two poets who are on a panel both resemble me somewhat. Two-minute panel on poetry and truth. The older poet says, I try not to make up anything. I side with Milosz, who believed that ideally the poet's life should be the contemplation of the word is. The younger poet says, I like the sound of that, but I'll go with Picasso. Art is the lie that tells the truth. I mean, I always thought I was conceived in a Bleecker Street walk-up during a power outage. My parents were philosophy students who, writing their God is Dead essays, found their electric typewriters suddenly useless. So their love cries joined the profane chorus rising above the village. On the contrary, my mother said when she overheard me telling this to a friend, that's how your sister was conceived. On your particular night in question, we were in New Jersey visiting my father. If anything, you were conceived in absolute silence. I was crushed. The one thing I knew about how I came into this world turned out to be my own private creation myth. And I began asking myself if anything I knew about my life were true, or if I'd made the whole thing up, which is when I think I became a poet. Poet, from the Greek for maker. And the older poet says, fine, without contraries, there's no progression and all that. I join you in a celebration of the imagination, but I lost my wife, my children, in a single day. Too much is at stake. I want to affirm with as much accuracy and passion as I can muster what is now and will never be again. I mean, everyone today says much the same as you. Make things up that tell the truth. So you're in the majority, but I'd rather live at the border of things. And youth says, yes, I understand, but don't forget that it was the liars, the Picasso poets, that Plato kicked out of the Republic. We're the ones on the outside, on the border. And the older one says, no, you're at the center now. I'm not going to give up my edge. The moderator intervenes. I wonder if we've started talking about something else. And the older addresses the younger again. You make up whatever you like, but I'll keep writing what happens in the city's heart. I'm haunted by the way that we all are connected in so many different ways. This is called Shouting at the Windows of the Night, November 2nd, 1965. My birthday of the electric guitar. It might for me have been nothing more than the four of us practicing in the basement, Louie Louie, because our governor tried to ban the song statewide, thereby proclaiming it the anthem any Indiana band must learn first. Johnny claimed he knew the real version, lyrics so lewd the Kingsmen had to slur them. So we mastered the art of mumbling the words meaningfully. Then someone said we'd never beat the government in making the obscene unclear. So in that not quite soundproof cellar, until Father came down to say, "Boys, it's a school night." We shouted the wrong words to Louie, Louie, as clearly as we could. I didn't hear the news until later, but the same day I turned 15, a Quaker from Baltimore drove through rush hour red to the Pentagon. Witnesses disagreed whether Norman Morrison doused himself in kerosene before or after he let his infant daughter go. But she was there as her father became a 12-foot pillar of fire, roaring at the window of the defense secretary. And no one, not the bystanders, not the police who rushed to his side, not Secretary McNamara himself, no one could make out his last words. 44 birthdays ago, but sometimes Norman Morrison still draws near as I celebrate. He who had done everything he knew how to do, protested, prayed, refused war taxes, now shares with me the 2nd of November, the Day of the Dead. Something in me thinks I understand giving one's life for others, but what if he meant to take his daughter with him? What if he thought an American child must burn so that we could see what napalm does? The flames rose, and at some point the father let his daughter go. Perhaps he held her until his arms' muscles contracted in a jolt of flame, or maybe an angel commanded, "Release her," though I hope he'd already put her down before lighting the match, knowing this death was his alone. Witnesses could tell us nothing. They only agreed they couldn't understand a single word he shouted at the windows of the night. Years ago, I had published 2 poems, maybe, in an obscure little magazine, and somebody said, "Ted, you're a published poet. Would you be willing to lead a prison workshop?" So with the vanity of a published poet, I said, "Of course." Carlos. My first day leading the prison writing workshop, Carlos complimented my choosing the chair nearest the door. I read a poem by Whitman that once sent me hitchhiking, and Carlos stood up, asked to read a section from his 400-page work in progress, a poem that turns on his first finding Neruda's one-year walk. He said it lit up the night like a perfect crime, so I left everything. I had no choice, walked 3,000 miles to the Pacific. He recited a passage in which his father left the family a small fortune, all counterfeit. Though I doubted the facts, I can still see the worn briefcase, almost perfect hundreds, stacked neatly in shrink-wrapped packs. I was young. It took me 2 weeks to accept that I could teach this lifer nothing. world of concrete floors and everlasting light. He was grateful to God, who gave him a blazing mind not granted to anyone living or dead, and wouldn't have changed a word anyway. When I was 19, I walked a 1,000-mile, 6-month circle around Ireland and fell in love with that country. Returned to Richmond, Indiana, where I was going to school, fell in love with Annie. And so we raised 3 children, and things got more complicated as my oldest child, our daughter, Catelyn, found fault with almost everything that I did, if you can imagine. And then when she turned 19, she decided what she most wanted to do in the whole world was walk a circle around Ireland. And I began to think maybe there was some hope for me. She ended up in Greece, and that's where part of this poem takes place. It's called The Singing. That morning, 2 nuthatches sauntered headfirst down the pine to a place where it was written in the wind, yes, they like it. And for that moment, it was the house of the world, the green bough where they chatted and strolled upside down. Then our daughter called from Greece, giving her first and last name, as if to make sure we knew who she was. Her 4,000 miles away voice pleaded for help as a man hammered on heavy glass, and we thought we'd have to listen to each scream of her rape or murder. No. Neighbors intervened. We stayed on the phone until a woman told us, "Stop worry. Please stop worry." Alone again in our living room, my wife said she felt weak from the inside out, and I asked if she heard something like a girl chanting the whole time. There was this singing on the line, I said, but my wife hadn't heard it, and answered, "Do I have to start worrying about you now?" I've never mentioned it again. It must have been some part of myself, some knowledge that we can't finally keep each other safe. Our daughter changed her ticket, crossed the night, and came home, though what home is keeps changing since that call. There is a map and a clock and a humming in the room. There is coffee or champagne and kofta curry. There is a family, or at least the hope that someone might, if not rescue us, hear us. There is this chatting together as we amble about upside down and try to get used to the perspective. And there is this shared time, which is the green bough, for which I am grateful. In 2000, Annie and I quit our jobs, sold our house, and went for 1 year to rent a house in Ireland to give ourselves a sabbatical, because all of our writing friends were professors and went off and had wonderful sabbaticals in the south of Italy someplace. And nurses got 2 weeks vacation. It was time for us to do some writing seriously. And so we moved to Cape Clear Island. It's 8 miles off the coast of County Cork. We were in the southernmost house in all of Ireland, because we were on the southern end of the island with cliffs as a backyard. Annie worried that we would suffer from island madness because there was only 120 people, and she'd read D.H. Lawrence, The Man Who Loved Islands and Knows What Can Happen. We did okay. The worst it gets is described in this poem when our daughter Kat came to the island. Over the rainbow. She arrives on the island and finds her parents no longer communicate except through song. When she mentions this, her father intones in the voice of a Mount Athos monk, "We barely know we're doing it." And her mother, somehow become Judy Garland, sings, "It's the harmless madness of the long married." Outside, the gale lifts itself an octave, and the father follows. Or maybe it's the onset of mutual Alzheimer's. Odd, he's never before been able to carry a tune. And the mother's alto, for years rarely raised in song, sounds now like sunlight's hot whiskey on roaring Water Bay. Soon the daughter's singing her questions and responses too, her dance hall soprano, creating harmonies that would please the socks-off Prospero. Their time together is of a sweetness. So when the daughter leaves, as she must, the house falls silent. Only the wind keeps nattering. Neither parent feels like talking in song. In Ireland, at this point in the evening, the host might pour another drink and ask everybody for a song, and you'd go around, and for year after year, I would say, "I'm American. I don't do party pieces. I can't sing." And I got away with that for a couple of years, and then friends began saying, "Ted, you've been here long enough, produce." So I wrote the poem with 3 lines of singing in it. Nobody has asked me to sing since. Okay. A year and a half ago, my father died at the age of 91, and when we returned to Ireland, Annie, we'd been for a month having to teach in different residencies and workshops, and it was really brutal not being able to just sort of stop and grieve. And Annie said, "Into the water you go." We went into the North Atlantic, very chilly, and the next day we did it again, and it ended up becoming a practice where I've been doing that for the last year and a half now, just sort of on a daily basis throughout the year. And I've written a book-length poem, which I am not going to inflict on you tonight, that's just going down to the water and having that moment just sort of taken out of the day's busyness, and going for the swim and then coming back and doing a short bit of writing. This would have been the first poem in the book, except for it's the last poem in this one. And so I'll read you that. It's called Sisyphus. I didn't think that I would have to give any sort of preface to Sisyphus, except for there was some misunderstanding the last time I read this, and somebody was worrying about this venereal disease. So Sisyphus, of course, is the poor king that ended up having to roll the boulder up the mountain, and then it would roll down, and he's condemned to do this. So we're back on Cape Clear Island here. Sisyphus. All of us carrying one thing or the other uphill every day. But once the dog we called Sisyphus refused to climb the hill again. Sisyphus, who followed his sociable nose downhill on his daily rounds, who was part of the scene at the pier or shop or the little green shoebox of the Library of Good Welcome. Sisyphus, who found one evening his stiff and swollen joints wouldn't let him trudge back home. So he sat at the foot of the hill and waited. Someone stopped and drove him up the Loch of Ore. After that, he'd be there each evening, and raising his paw like a hitchhiker was a formality, since everyone stopped anyway. Towards the end, they'd even hoist him up into the car, and then at the gate of his home, lift him gently down. All of us carrying one thing or another, uphill as long as we're able, which isn't forever, whatever our myths say. All of us setting off on our daily rounds in need of the next welcome. One last poem. This one is 9 short parts. It's set in the south of France and in the western part of the US, mostly Spokane. It's sort of back and forth between dreams and what I like to think of as real life. And so it would just sort of flow with it. It's maybe my sort of argumentative Valentine's Day poem for the Gospel of Beauty. Bella Rada. During my youth, on a 1,000-mile walk around Ireland, my dreams grew strange and bright as planets. And I woke once, laughing, having just witnessed my own birth. A young woman holding her newborn stepped from rows of tasseling corn as a voiceover intoned, and they named him Bella Rada. Bella, beautiful, Rada, wheel. That's how I translated it, recalling a Serbian circle dance I'd known in college, though later I found it meant beautiful Rada. Rada is a woman's name. No matter, she's part of me now. Bella Rada. This morning, our second in Languedoc, I woke repeating Belarus. In daylight, I know it means White Russia. But the sun's logic isn't nights. In the dream, it was Bella, beautiful, Rus, Russian. A friend had phoned from Spokane. Are you awake, she asked, or are you still dreaming? She was at a wedding where things were going terribly wrong. The body of a waitress from Belarus, or did she say Beltane, was discovered in a ballroom. Then I was in Spokane myself, stepping over yellow tape, assuring the groom, this is not a sign, don't call off the wedding. In Spokane, the only place with a proper dream ballroom is the Davenport, the same hotel where Vachel Lindsay once lived. Epileptic, prone to visions, Lindsay styled himself the last of the troubadours and set off to preach the gospel of beauty. Today, some of his work strikes me as tedious, but when I was 19, his handy guide for beggars inspired my 6 months walk. I liked, too, that Lindsay, while recovering at the Davenport from a breakdown, met a woman half his age and beautiful. They married the next day in what he called a wedding by spontaneous combustion. The gospel of beauty. Perhaps it began here in Languedoc, in songs composed by troubadours for the Cathar women of cabaret. Though the church saw them as heretics, their beauty called forth the praise of poets like Vidal and de Miraval. Yesterday we climbed to their ruined chateaux, negotiating the same paths once taken by 100 Cathars from the village of Bram. Blinded by crusaders, noses and upper lips cut off, they were sent by the church as a warning to the citizens of cabaret. Passion and beauty and sorrow, all raised under one roof. A few weeks after they met, my parents wed. Spontaneous combustion, yes. But also the war meant there wasn't time to take things slowly. They were in Idaho, not far from Spokane, living in a motel suite with my father's best man and his new bride. And when on a training flight, his friend crashed into a mountain, my father could only watch from his own plane and keep flying. That night, his friend's lovely wife clawed my father's face. Dostoevsky said, "Beauty will save the world." But when has beauty ever saved anything, even itself? And where did Lindsay's gospel of beauty lead him? He drank a bottle of Lysol in the same house where he was born. A man flies into a mountainside. A girl from Belarus is found in the Marie Antoinette ballroom with its accents of 22-karat gold. The church spares one man's eyes so he can lead the other Cathars up the cypress-lined precipice as an example for wrong believers. And Dostoevsky's Prince Myshkin, having proclaimed that beauty would save the world, this gentle visionary fell in love with two magnificent women at once, and of course went mad. In the Maltese Falcon, a man named Flitcraft was almost killed by a falling beam. Understanding then that life is random, he vanished, then showed up at the Davenport with a new wife, much like his first. Sam Spade liked that Flitcraft adjusted himself to beams falling, and then no more of them fell, and he adjusted himself to them not falling. Hard to tell sometimes if the Davenport is a hotel, in a novel, or in real life, or in a dream. So many beautiful people check in and disappear. Clark Gable, Sarah Bernhardt, Amelia Earhart. And those who have managed thus far not to disappear, spontaneous combustion. Strange the people it joins. My parents outgrew first love, then found love again and again, together. 63 years since beauty drew them close, and they must help each other now with the simplest chores. Blindness, surgeries, depression, and all the rest. Yet sometimes when they look at each other, they seem to realize how lucky they are. Love and loss, and love again. Bellarada. Our last full day in Languedoc. We visit two more Cathar strongholds, hilltop castles that couldn't stave off crusaders or inquisitors. still. Against all evidence, I want to believe Dostoevsky about beauty. The owls call out as we fall asleep, and come morning a dream in which I'm toasting a bride and groom in an orchard, only it's not me. I seem to be the girl from Belarus, disfigured and somehow beautiful, wishing them luck. Belarus or Bellarada, the whirl of spokes. We breakfast on the terrace in dawn's birth light, while everything plunges in hazy green into the ridge-shadowed ravine. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out tonight. We had so many emails from people today saying, the weather. I thought we were going to need to get the horses out and hook them up to sleighs to get people to come in. Thank you also, Brianna and Suzanne, for invitation to be here. It's wonderful. One of the things students have been asking us this week is, where do you get your poems from? And for me, a lot of them go back to memories, childhood memories, or something that surprised me along the way, an image that I can't get beyond, and that I sort of explore what is holding me with this image. My father was a minister. When he died, when we were clearing out the family home, we had cartons and cartons of his handwritten sermons, and nobody in the family wanted them. That's an image for you. So I'm going to start with this poem called Sacrament of the Bees. After my father died, no, I mean later, after my mother died, there was the problem of family treasure no one wanted. What does it mean that we tossed out a whole wall of boxes, a lifetime's work of his eloquent, handwritten sermons? Brothers, sister, we all divided things up, chose which inheritances we would carry forth. The thing is, somewhere in the midst of all that judgment, those penned words may have held the sweetest and best of that complex man, even if none of us wanted to shoulder the weight of all those lessons. One morning in August, I watched from the chicken coop roof, tar softening beneath my knees, as my father opened the battered beehive behind the apple tree in the garden, an act I only got to witness once. My brother was with his chickens while my mother moved slowly through morning chores, so only an idle 6-year-old was there to watch his father emerge from the barn. White sleeves rolled down, bleached trousers tucked, and his veiled helmet like something my mother would wear to church. August, and even so early in the morning, the heat made my father appear to shimmer in shades of white against the corn as he squeezed a cloud from the tip of the tin bee smoker, then pried loose the hive's great lid. Did amber flow that day, or was the colony already lost? Whether he spoke then to the living or the dead, he was murmuring something to that hive, something that is lost now, something we are poorer without and freer. Thank you. Another poem from that same summer. It was the summer I turned 6. It was the summer that our family moved finally from the parsonage into our own home, old farmhouse in Woodstock, Connecticut. Not so very far from here. And this one's in here partially for Doug, Suzanne, well, the horses, the ponies. It was the summer we had a pony. It's called Silver Bell. The summer I was 6, my father rented Silver Bell, a round, ill-tempered pony who liked to bite. Despite being the youngest, I was the only one who could ride her. She used to buck and send my brothers flying. I liked the view from Silver Bell's broad back. It was as though I'd come into my true height, 4 feet off the ground. Who was watching out for me the day of the summer haying, my tall hay playhouses cut and fallen, the tractor and baler traveling in ever smaller circles, Silver Bell beneath me stubbornly cropping when the machinery's racket abruptly stopped, and from the far field where the foxes sometimes played came a shout. My brothers needed a crowbar to fix the baler. And then we were trotting out over golden cuts, Silver Bell and me riding out over remnants of grass houses, trying to deliver the iron bar when it slapped by accident against Silver Bell's neck. And who would have believed that fat pony could bolt so fast, take off over fields and up the road past the convent of the Sisters of the Holy Ghost, hoofs clattering on the black tarmac, my brothers running too now, though I couldn't see them, only the saddle horn. Don't let go of the saddle horn until the pony, winded, finally slowed. My brothers arrived first, and then my sister driving the green station wagon to bring your body home, she told me later. And where were our parents? It's taken years for me to place that afternoon into the August of my father's heart attack. When the pony ran, it was hospital visiting hours, and we 4 were left on our own. Turning for home down Route 169, maple leaves over our heads like a celebration of flags, and the unruly pony now docile. We must have made a ragtag parade as we passed the gathered black-habited nuns, my sister driving slowly while one brother followed with Silver Bell, leading her back to a rented pony's destiny of always being returned. And bringing up the rear, my other brother with me perched high on his back, his sweaty white t-shirt prickly with hayseed, one of my arms wrapped around his sunburned neck, and everyone waving. Everyone waving. Thank you. So we come, and winter has come. And what a winter it is, I guess. I think I'm the only one that's been sort of happy to see the snow. Everybody else is sick of it, but we don't get much snow in Ireland. So with the snow, I have to read a poem that takes place in winter, right? And I have kind of mixed feelings about it because it's about a plane accident that happened when I was home from college at Christmas vacation one year. And the family that died in the plane accident came from Ellington, Connecticut, which again is not terribly far from here. Yeah. Some of you may even remember the family, the Cripps family. This is called Winter. I have to say, it really was a maze behind our house. So this all happened. Winter. Sometimes when someone tells a ghost story, my husband pours me another glass of wine, says, "Why don't you tell them about the plane?" I often find I unwind that 30-year-old memory as if it were a fairy tale. The girl walking into the woods with her father in search of a lost family. In those days, the girl preferred never to walk in the woods with her father. But the family had been dead almost a week when the man rose up and came to her in that space we sometimes inhabit between waking and sleep. Already dead, what force could launch him through woods and stubbled cornfields to a line he somehow couldn't cross? Later, when she called it a dream, she knew it wasn't. His motion was slow, stretched against natural law, until he stood in December grass and called for help. A silent call which reached the farmhouse's back bedroom, so next morning the girl and her father set off to search. Pockets filled with candy, they entered the woods, guessing at each new turn. No, not guessing. For miles, they were almost led through a maze of logging roads and deer trails. Why tell this like a fairy tale? Why can't I say what happened? Above my father and me, fresh white branch breaks. And when we turned together, we saw over the stone wall lime green pieces of a plain scattered across forest floor. The family had been dead almost a week when my father crossed to them, and the dance not yet done. At the same moment, we gazed into the treetop and saw the boy cradled there. Before dark and the winter's first snow, chainsaws brought the boy to earth. If sometimes I tell this like a fairy tale, maybe it's because at the heart of such stories is horror. And yet, strangely, it seems now one of my best days with my father, not afraid of him as together we headed home. Where the path narrowed, he walked ahead and seemed older, human, his boots worn on one side. Thank you. Thank you. So as Ted said, we have 3 amazing, wonderful grown-up children, but we almost didn't get that far. But the years when they were teenagers, when we were in Northampton, they were pretty tough years. So anybody with teenage kids, you know, they do grow up eventually. This takes place during those years. This is called Stirring the Pot. After a night of broken sleep, our teenage daughter disappearing into the night with a boy we've never met, someone we only know as Rufus. Mm-hmm. Rufus. Someone we only know. Let's see. My sister tells me, whatever you do, don't isolate yourselves. We promised our daughters we'd be discreet. It almost killed us. So I try speaking out. I talk to the soup pot. I'm feeling helpless. And the soup says, we're all in it together, dear. It's only going to get hotter, lots hotter before it's done. As I wash the dishes, I ask the mallows, what should I do? And they answer, dress yourself in pink, darling, then sway, sway. You're dancing the great fandango. And when the door opens and shuts and I hear her steps disappearing up the stairs, I ask the door for advice. It thinks for a moment and says, just don't lock me. Don't lock me. Leave her away back in baby cakes. Leave her away back home. Thank you. Mourning, it seems, is one of the work we're called to do in this world, learning to love and then learning to let go again. And after my mother died, I had a whole slew of poems that came to me. It was, it's like poems would arrive almost like little dreams. This next poem takes place in Paris. We'd gone there, and of all the places that we visited, and we went to a lot of museums. It was fantastic. But the last museum we ended up going to was the Science Museum, and that was the place that surprisingly the poems were coming from. So this is called Rue de Lille. The same man who sang in my dream sings in the street beneath my hotel room, my first night in Paris, 4 a.m., and this man's a whole chorus. Not content to be just a tenor, he takes all the parts, one after another. As he turns off Rue de Lille, he's a soprano heading for the river. Then a phrase of Brahms descending into baritone drifts back to my window. Sicher, ich sage euch ein Geheimnis. I know these words, sang this requiem not long after my mother's death. Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. There are times when it feels we're lifted on something summoned by shadow, touch, or some other element we don't yet know. Like the brilliant shades of a moth's wing which depend upon emptiness. Light strikes dark inner walls and sends back trumpets of color. Wings iridescent as singing that wakes you on a spring night. 6 years my mother's been gone, but it feels like a chorus of one. Not quite asleep, but not quite changed. Thank you. As Ted said, we went to live on Cape Clear Island. We loved it. I didn't think we had very complicated feelings at all. It was fantastic. We've never felt so integrated into a community. When there are only 120 people, new people everybody wants to know everything about you, and stories are the currency of Ireland. Time came that we had to leave, make some money, and we went to Andover, Massachusetts. Ted was writer-in-residence there at Phillips Academy. What we didn't expect was I ended up becoming very ill. I had a burst appendix that was misdiagnosed. I was told I just had a little flu bug. Go home, take the medicine. And 3 weeks later, I was at death's door because, it had burst. So I had a wonderful Nicaraguan surgeon who took me into her care at Mass General Hospital, saved my life. She said I had been hours from death when she operated. We already had tickets to return to Cape Clear for that summer, and it was great because I had to learn to walk again after being so ill. And this poem takes place on that return visit. It's called After Emergency Surgery. Cradled in rare blue light, the island spreads out below. I didn't think I'd be able to return this year, but here is the house with its stone table and the sudden pheasant with its surprising red crown and the cow's black flanks shimmering in early Irish summer. Sounds of children swimming in South Harbor, and all the while a smell of scythed hay mixing somehow with lavender. Sometimes I think of the soul as a winged visitor wandering here, then out of view. Who made the painting that hangs in the Louvre just to the right of Giotto's St. Francis preaching to the birds? In it, an angel kneels, offers Mary a lily as he rends her life. Each word a miracle, but it's the rifts of plumage, the rainbowed wings that steal the show, as if the painter could not restrain himself, as if paradise were a tropical island which he'd once caught sight of. A farmer burns gorse at the end of the bill. Black-backed gulls glide through the plumes, but just beyond, against the background of blue, a single sail fills with light. I traveled that way myself this spring, lay rocking in bed as my boat rose, the vibrations of something I could not see, keeping me company throughout the night, though I remember no birds or angels. But there was something like a sail, no paradise, not even a lily, something like the trembling of a sail. Thank you. Thank you. And one of the nice things, one of the really lovely things about being in Ireland is it's so easy to just pop over on Ryanair, very cheap flights over to the continent. So we've been enjoying that aspect. This poem takes place down on the south coast of southwest France in a little town called Coullier. Think of Matisse's paintings, you know, windows looking out on the sea, and the chances are those were painted there. It's a small poem. It deals with the poet from Spain, Antonio Machado, who during the Spanish Civil War slipped over the border, took refuge in France, and then he died before he was able to return home again. When we visited, we went off to pay our respects at his grave and were bowled away by the fact that 60-some years later, the Spanish people still make their pilgrimage there. They pay homage to him. The grave was decorated, fresh flowers, all sorts of mementos. It's called Snapshot Coullier. Late afternoon in the dirty white walls of Coulier's back streets are warmed to the same pink as the blossoms we've stolen for Antonio Machado's grave. An Andalusian in France, his boat forever tied to another shore. The elderly couple from Barcelona we met earlier in the market have brought their dog to Machado's grave. They're taking turns pushing a baby buggy with a raggedy spaniel stretched out within. He's on ice, they explain, as they flip back the blanket. His hips are shot, but he does so love to see the world. And two last poems here. This one's a comparatively new one. It's called And When the Red Wine from Minervois. And it's set in Connemara, where we live now. And when the red wine from Minervois turns out to be white, my guard let down, the words slipped out. I need to bring the wash in from the line. How many years has it been? I must have been all of 7 when I realized only my mother brought up in Bryn Mawr ever spoke of washcloths. Soon I could say wash with the best of them. Wash the dishes, do the wash. My father reminding me always to wash between my legs. The washcloth strategically floating over him during our shared baths. There are so many things I've never gotten to tell you, Mother, and my shame over your accent was undeniably the least. I will bring in the wash from the line tonight. I will make up my marriage bed. I will rejoice in the sun calves frolicking the cliff road above the sea. I will try and find the right words to say what has never been said. That was a long time coming of a poem. This last poem brings together a lot of things, not the least of which is the question of home. Where is home? What is home? What are our relationships with others? Thanks so much. It's called Irises. I'm awake in the night again, asking which country, no, which continent I'm on. Floodlight like snow blows against the barn door, and I'm traveling the land where one brother brings warm water for hens while the other pitches hay to the heifer in her stall. A fragment of dream with morning on my baby son's skin and irises blooming in snow. When the tingling begins, then the letting down of blue streams, and once again, I'm as lonely as long beds in winter gardens, lonely as the hospital ward where the city's crown of blue jeweled lights blinks like an apparition wreathed by irises and prayers. I drift, feeling that everyone is alone, but is going to be home someday. The cow, the pony, the Rhode Island Reds, and even the poor souls in the monastery gatehouse. Oh, everything is full of yearning. But at the center of it, a young mother drifts and nurses her son among irises in the white, falling world. Thank you. Thank you very much.